I found my daughter on the side of the highway, sitting in the mud with her hazard lights still blinking. She could barely lift her head. My mother-in-law arranged this, she told me. Said my kind had no business mixing with their family. I drove her home, and I sent one text to my younger brother. You remember what Daddy showed us in a swamp? It's time. Hello, everyone. Pull up a chair and set down whatever you're carrying for a little while. I want to tell you a story that changed how I see the people I love most. Tell me where you're watching from. I'm glad you're here. November in Beaufort County is not pretty. The marshes go gray, the wind off the water cuts right through you, and the roads out past the old rice fields get slick and mean after rain. I have lived in this county for 63 years, and I still grip the wheel a little tighter when the fog rolls in off the creek. My name is Eleanor Ward. Most people call me Ellie. I spent 31 years as the head nurse at Beaufort Elementary before I retired, and before that I raised 2 children, mostly alone after my husband passed from a heart attack at 47. My daughter Maya is 32 years old. My brother Derek is 59. Between the 2 of them and his old house on Sycamore Lane, that is my whole world. Maya married into the Holt family 3 years ago. They are old money in this county. Raymond Holt built half the commercial real estate from here to Columbia, and his wife Constance ran the Low Country Arts Foundation, which she founded herself 20 years ago. Very respected. Very polished. The kind of woman who always has the right shoes for every occasion and makes sure you notice. I noticed something else about Constance Holt from the very first Sunday dinner. The way she looked at Maya. Not rudely, not loudly. Just a small tightening around the eyes whenever my daughter spoke. A half-second pause before she responded, as if she needed a moment to decide whether the words were worth answering. I know that look. I have been on the receiving end of it my whole life. I know exactly what it means. My son-in-law Brandon is a decent man, a little soft in the places that count. He loves Maya, I believe that truly. But he was raised to keep the peace inside that house, and keeping the peace meant not seeing what was right in front of him. The phone rang at 8:14 on a Tuesday evening. I was taking a sweet potato pie out of the oven. Mama. Her voice was wrong. Maya. What happened? Where are you? A long pause. I could hear wind. Traffic somewhere distant. I'm on Route 21. Past the Coosaw Bridge. I had an accident. I'm okay. But Mama, I need you to come. Please don't call anyone else yet. I turned off the oven, grabbed my keys, and was in the car before I finished pulling on my coat. She was not okay. I saw the car first. A silver sedan with the front passenger door caved in and glass scattered across the shoulder. Maya was sitting on the guardrail 20 feet away, arms wrapped around herself. When my headlight swept over her, I saw the side of her face. The cheekbone was already swelling. There was blood from a cut above her eyebrow, dried and dark against her skin. I got to her and held both her hands and made myself breathe slowly. Baby, I am right here. Tell me what happened. She said she had been driving home from a meeting downtown. Constance had called and asked her to stop by the house first. Said there was paperwork for the foundation she needed Maya to look over. Something about the new Art Center grant. Maya went. They sat in Constance's study. Maya saw something in the documents she was not supposed to see. What did you see? Her voice dropped so low I had to lean in. Grant disbursements. To a company called Palmetto Creative Partners. $340,000 last year alone. $280,000 the year before. I looked it up on my phone while she was out of the room. Mama, that company has no website, no address, no nothing. I felt the stillness settle over me, the kind that comes not from calm but from clarity. Constance came back into the study. Maya told me that when she asked about the company, Constance's face changed. Not anger exactly, something colder. She told Maya she had misunderstood the structure of nonprofit accounting, that it was complex, that Maya should leave that kind of analysis to people with the right background. Maya said the phrase out loud to me there on the highway. Voice flat. People with the right background. We both understood what the right background meant, and what kind of background it excluded. Maya said she told Constance she wanted to show the documents to Brandon. That was when Constance stood up and told her, very quietly, that she had been a mistake from the beginning, that Brandon needed someone who would strengthen this family, not someone who would drag it down to where she came from, that the foundation, the reputation, everything Raymond and she had built, would not be compromised by the wrong kind of loyalty. Maya got up to leave. She told me she made it to the front door. She was reaching for the handle when she felt a shove from behind. Hard enough to send her down the porch steps. She hit the brick walkway. She got up and ran to the car. She drove until her hands stopped shaking enough to call me. I looked at my daughter. Her coat was torn at the elbow. Her knuckle was bleeding where it had scraped the brick. And something behind her eyes looked frightened in a way I had not seen since she was small. "We are not going to the hospital tonight," she said before I could suggest it. "Brandon will call her the minute he hears. And she has Dr. Reeves. She has everyone." I helped her to my car. I looked back once at the silver sedan and made a decision. I texted my brother 4 words. "Come to Mama's house." Derek was at my door by 10:30. He drove straight from Charleston, where he had been working a security contract. He came through the door, took one look at Maya on my sofa with an ice pack on her cheekbone, and said nothing for a moment. Then he sat across from her and said, "Start from the beginning. Derek spent 22 years with the state law enforcement division before he retired. He knows how to listen without moving his face." He let Maya talk for 40 minutes without interrupting once. When she finished, he looked at me. "You said Palmetto Creative Partners. That's the name." He nodded slowly. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small notebook, the same kind he has carried for 30 years, and began to write. "What are you thinking?" I asked. "I'm thinking that name is familiar." He kept writing. "Give me until morning." I set Maya up in her old room, changed the bandage over her eyebrow, gave her 2 ibuprofen and a glass of water. She caught my hand as I was about to leave. "Mama." Her eyes were steady but afraid. "Brandon doesn't know I'm here." "I know. Do you think he would have stopped her?" I thought about the right answer for a moment. "I think he would have tried," I said finally. "And I think she would have talked him out of it." She let go of my hand and turned toward the wall. I stood in the doorway a moment longer before I pulled the door closed. I did not sleep much. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea going cold and thought about my father, Clarence Ward, who grew up in a 2-room house in Ace Basin and became the kind of man that people drove miles to ask for counsel. He knew every inch of this low country. He knew who owned what and who owed who and where the bodies were buried, sometimes literally. He used to say that the people who think they hold the power are only right until someone who knows more decides otherwise. He taught Derek and me that knowledge is not just something you keep in your head. It is something you keep in your hands, in your connections, in your patience. I thought about what he would do sitting at this table tonight. By 6 in the morning, Derek was back, carrying a folder and 2 coffees from the gas station down the road. "Palmetto Creative Partners," he said, sitting down across from me. "Registered 18 months ago with the Secretary of State's office. Listed agent is a man named Franklin Oree, 71 years old, lives in a nursing home in Bluffton. Probably doesn't know his name is on anything. So it's a shell. It's a shell." He opened the folder. "But here's what gets interesting. The registered address is a mailbox store on Ribaut Road. That same address also appears on the filings for 2 other companies, Coastal Heritage Consulting and Sea Island Grant Services. Both have received disbursements from nonprofit foundations in the past 4 years. Both are shells. How much total?" He turned a page. His face was the same careful nothing it always was. "Best I can piece together right now, somewhere north of $1.5 million. I set my coffee down. "Over what period?" 4 years. Maybe longer. My guys are still pulling records." "And Constance Holt's name appears where?" "Not directly." He looked up at me. "That's the craft of it. The foundation board approves disbursements on her recommendation. The checks go to the shells. The shells are connected to a property management company that nobody has looked at closely yet. The money moves sideways before it comes back around. Then how to reconnect it to her?" He smiled for the first time that morning. "Because Franklin Oree's daughter gave me a call back at 5:30 this morning. She said her daddy's been signing things for years for a woman who brings him a bottle of grape juice and a crossword puzzle book every other Wednesday." He pulled out his phone and played a short audio recording. A woman's voice, tired but clear, describing a white woman in her early 60s who came to her father's room at the Bluffton facility. Well-dressed. Very polite. Called herself Connie. I stared at the recorder. "My daughter is upstairs with a cut on her face." "I know that. This woman pushed her down porch steps." "I know that too." Derek leaned forward. "We have to be careful, Ellie. If we go to the local sheriff with this right now, Raymond Holt has 3 friends on the county council and one of the deputies went to school with Brandon. This doesn't go through the front door. Then where does it go?" He closed the folder. "You remember Daddy talking about a man named Hollis Ford?" The name took a moment. "State AG's office? Retired?" Derek nodded. "He's a consultant now. Still has connections to the federal nonprofit oversight division. IRS tax-exempt branch. He owes me a favor going back about 15 years that I never collected. Call him. That's the plan. I went upstairs. Maya was awake, sitting up in bed with her phone in her hand, and that look on her face that I recognize, the look of someone choosing what to say before they say it. Brandon has called 4 times, she said. What did you tell him? That I stayed here because I wasn't feeling well. She looked at her hands. He doesn't know what his mother did. Not the pushing. Not the documents. None of it. Do you want him to know? She was quiet for a long time. I watched her face work through the question. Finally, she said, I want to know first whether it matters, whether knowing would change anything about what he would do. That is a wise question, I said. I didn't used to be this wise. She said it without bitterness, just fact. I used to think love was enough to make people brave. I sat on the edge of the bed. Tell me something. The first year you were married, were you happy? She looked at the window. The marshes were bright in the morning light, gold green, the herons standing still in the shallows. Some of it, she said. The parts that were just us. But there was always this wait. Every family dinner, every event for the foundation. She always found a way to let me know I was a guest. That I was there on tolerance, she never said it plain. She didn't have to. She turned to look at me. Do you know what she said to me once? She said she admired how hard I worked, considering where I started. The way she said considering, like it was a handicap I'd been charitable enough not to complain about. I took her hand. We are going to handle this, but I need you to be patient for a little while longer. She squeezed my hand. What is Derek doing? Making a phone call to someone who can help. She nodded. She trusted Derek the way she had trusted him since she was small, when he used to drive her to school on his motorcycle and pretend not to see how the other kids stared with envy. Hollis Ford called Derek back that afternoon. They spoke for 40 minutes while I made soup and Maya slept. When Derek came into the kitchen, his expression told me something had shifted. Hollis says this isn't the first time someone has flagged the Low Country Arts Foundation. He said there was a complaint filed 2 years ago by a former board member. It was referred to the state attorney's office and went nowhere. He thinks it was buried. By who? He doesn't know. But he says the federal tax-exempt division has broader jurisdiction, and they don't answer to county council members. What does he need from us? Everything we have. Bank statements, the shell company registrations, the recordings, and he wants a signed statement from Maya about what she saw in those documents. I went upstairs and told my daughter. She sat up straight. She looked at me with those eyes that had been serious since she was 4 years old, always watching, always understanding more than I thought she should have to at whatever age she was. If I sign a statement, Brandon will know everything. Yes. She nodded slowly. Then he should know everything. Yes. She nodded slowly. Then he should know everything. It took another day and a half to compile what Derek had gathered alongside the photographs Maya had taken on her phone in those few minutes alone in the study. She had photographed 6 pages before Constance came back into the room, 6 pages that showed disbursement approvals with Constance's initials in the margin and the Palmetto Creative Partners account number printed clearly at the bottom. On the 3rd day, while Derek was driving the documents to Hollis Ford in Columbia, Raymond Holt appeared at my front door. He was alone. No driver, no assistant. He stood on my porch in a plain gray coat, hat in his hand, and he looked older than I remembered him looking at the wedding. Mrs. Ward. His voice was steady, but something behind it was not. May I come in? I looked at him for a moment. Then I stepped back from the door. He sat in my living room with his hat on his knee, and he looked at the photographs on my mantel for a long time before he spoke. My daughter's graduation portrait. Derek in his SLED uniform. My husband Samuel in his fishing clothes, holding up a red fish and grinning like a boy. I know what Constance did, he said finally. To Maya or to the foundation. He looked at me then. Both. I waited. I found the accounts 3 weeks ago. He rubbed the side of his face. A property manager flagged an irregularity during a routine audit of one of our buildings. I started pulling threads. He shook his head slowly. I have been sitting on it because I did not want to believe it. And then Brandon told me last night what happened to Maya on the porch steps. His jaw tightened. I want you to know I did not raise my son to stand by while something like that happened to his wife. He came to me because he didn't know what else to do. Where is Constance now? I asked. She left yesterday morning. I told her what I had found, and I told her what I knew about Maya. She packed 2 bags and she went to her sister's in Savannah. I told her not to come back to this house. That is a beginning, I said. But it is not enough. No, he nodded. It isn't. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and placed a manila envelope on my coffee table. Financial records going back 5 years. Everything I could access on my end. I am cooperating with whatever investigation follows. Fully. I looked at the envelope. Why are you bringing this to me and not directly to the authorities? Because your brother already has an investigator involved, he said simply. And because I owe your daughter an apology that needs to come through you first. Maya came downstairs then. She had heard his car, I think. Or maybe just sensed something had changed in the weight of the house. She stood in the doorway in her robe, the bruise on her cheekbone yellow-green now. The cut above her eyebrow still bandaged. Raymond looked at her, and for a moment the careful businessman's face fell away, and what was underneath was just an old man with the particular grief of someone who has looked directly at something he spent years choosing not to see. Maya, he said, I am sorry for what my wife did to you, for what she made you feel from the day you married into this family. It was wrong, and I should have seen it sooner, and I am sorry that I did not. My daughter looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, Did Brandon know? About the documents? About the accounts? No. Raymond shook his head. Brandon didn't know anything about the finances. He was kept out of the business side by design. That was Constance's doing. She liked to keep him dependent. Maya came and sat in the chair across from him. She folded her hands in her lap the way she does when she is choosing her words very carefully. I believe you that you didn't know, she said. And I can see that finding out has cost you something. But what I need right now is not an apology. What I need is for the right people to have everything they need to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. Raymond nodded. You have it. Derek returned from Colombia the following morning with news that moved faster than we expected. Hollis Ford had walked the documents directly to a contact at the IRS tax-exempt branch in Atlanta, a woman he had known for 20 years who had apparently been watching the low-country nonprofit sector for irregularities. The documents Maya photographed, combined with the shell company registrations and Raymond's financial records, gave them enough to open a formal investigation. 3 weeks passed. The investigation did not make the news yet. Derek got calls from Hollis every few days and relayed what he could. The federal investigators were careful and thorough. They traced money through 4 different entities before it reappeared in 2 private accounts, one in Constance's maiden name, one in a joint name with a man Derek identified as a former board member of the foundation. Brandon came to my house on a Sunday in December. He knocked instead of walking in the way he usually did. Maya answered the door, and they stood on the porch for a long time before she let him in. I stayed in the kitchen and tried not to listen, which meant I heard everything. He said he was sorry. He said he had always known something was wrong in the way his mother treated Maya, that he had told himself it was generational, that it would soften. He said he had told himself a lot of things. He said he did not know about the finances, and he did not know about the push on the steps until his father told him, and when he found out he had driven 3 hours to Savannah and stood outside his mother's sister's house for 20 minutes before he drove back without going in. Maya said, What stopped you? He said he didn't know what he would do if he faced her, whether he would defend her or confront her, whether the habit of a lifetime would take over before he could stop it. He said he was ashamed of that. Maya said, I know. I heard a long silence. Then she said, I don't know what we are yet, Brandon. I don't know if I have it in me to rebuild something on this foundation, but I know I don't hate you, and I know this is not your fault. He said, Is there anything I can do? She said, Let your father do what he's doing, and give me time. In January, on a morning when ice glazed the marsh grass and my old furnace was working harder than it should, I got a call from the hospital. Not about Constance. About Maya. It was her OB's office. She had asked him to call me because she was not ready to tell me herself, and she did not want me to find out from her face. She was 10 weeks along. I sat with that information for about 4 minutes. Then I called Derek. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Well, that changes the math some. It changes everything, I said. We had not told Maya about the full scope of what was coming with the investigation. We had protected her from the details, and I was beginning to think that had been a mistake. She was about to be a mother. She deserved to know exactly what world she was bringing this child into. I drove to her apartment that afternoon. I brought sweet potato pie because I am who I am, and I cannot deliver difficult news without something warm in my hands. She opened the door and looked at my face and then at the pie, and then she laughed for the first time in 2 months. How did you find out? Dr. Kaplan's office. Sit down. We sat at her kitchen table while the light faded outside, and I told her everything. The shell companies, the $1.5 million, the federal investigation, the other board member, all of it. She listened without interrupting the same way Derek does. And I realized watching her that she had gotten that quality from watching him all her life. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, She was stealing from artists. From the kids in the youth programs. That's what it appears. Maya looked out the window. Her hand moved to her stomach, just resting there lightly, the way it would for the next 7 months every time something troubled her. She did that, she said slowly, and then she looked me in the eye and told me my background wasn't right for her family. Yes, she nodded once, like she was filing that truth in a permanent place. In February, the investigation became public. It was a brief item in the Post and Courier at first, a federal inquiry into financial irregularities at a Beaufort County nonprofit. Then, a Columbia reporter picked it up. By the third week, it had a name attached to it, and that name was Constance Holt. Constance issued a statement through an attorney. Accounting irregularities, complex nonprofit structures, errors in governance, no admission of anything. Raymond said nothing publicly. He had already voluntarily turned over his financial records and had met twice with federal investigators. His attorney confirmed his cooperation. Derek told me that Hollis Ford said Raymond's early cooperation had significantly strengthened the government's case. Brandon called me on the evening the story broke. He called me directly, not Maya. He asked if she was safe and if she was managing, and I told him yes. He asked if there was anything he could do. I thought about it for a genuine moment, and then I said, yes. There is one thing. He came over the following Saturday and fixed the loose board on my back porch steps that I had been meaning to deal with for 8 months. He worked in the cold for 2 hours without being asked to do more than the one thing, and when he was done, he knocked, handed me his hammer, and said he would be available whenever Maya was ready. I thanked him. I watched him walk back to his truck, and I thought about my husband Samuel, who had been gentle in similar ways, quiet in his goodness, and how much I still missed him on mornings that required more courage than I had available. Maya came to stay with me the last month before the baby was due. She did not want to be alone in the apartment, and I did not want her to be. Derek drove down every weekend. He built a crib in the spare room and complained the entire time about the instructions, and we teased him about it until he laughed. Raymond came once, in late March. He sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and asked if he could be part of the child's life. He said he understood if Maya needed time to answer. He said his attorney had advised him that Constance would likely accept a plea agreement in exchange for full restitution and surrender of the private accounts, which would mean no prison time but a complete financial accounting and permanent bar from nonprofit work. Is that justice? Maya asked him. He thought about it. He said, I believe it is the most the law will do. Whether it's justice depends on what you think justice is supposed to feel like. Maya looked at the marshes. Then she said, I think justice is supposed to feel like safety, and I feel safe right now on this porch, so maybe this is what it feels like. Raymond nodded. He stayed another 20 minutes and then he left, and Maya and I sat for a while longer without saying anything, just listening to the water birds out over the grass. On the first day of April, early in the morning when the light was still pink over the creek, Maya woke me from a dead sleep. She was calm. She had been timing contractions for 2 hours, and she had her bag by the front door already. Derek, I said when he picked up. I know. I'm already in the car. The hospital was 40 minutes. Maya breathed through each contraction with a focus that reminded me of the way she used to sit down to a hard test in school. Shoulders back, face determined. I held her hand and talked about nothing important, about the garden I was planning, about Derek's terrible crib assembly, about the name she had chosen. She had told me a week earlier. I had cried then, and I cried again in the car, thinking about it, quietly, so she would not see. Labor was long, 11 hours, hard. In the way that all real things are hard. I stayed beside her the whole time, and at the end, when the room filled with the fierce and absolute sound of a new voice entering the world, I felt something settle inside me that had been unsettled for 6 months. A girl, the nurse said. Strong lungs, said the doctor. Maya held her and looked at her daughter's face with an expression I have no word for. Not wonder exactly. Something older than wonder. Recognition. Tell me her name, I said. Clara, said Maya. For great-grandmother. Clara Ward, my grandmother's name. A woman who had picked tobacco in this same county before the war and raised 9 children and outlived 2 husbands and never once let anyone tell her what she was worth. Derek was in the waiting room. He stood up when I came out and I told him, and he sat back down hard in the plastic chair and pressed both hands over his face for a moment. Then he pulled himself together and grinned. Clara, he said. Clara! He shook his head, still smiling. Daddy would have liked that. Raymond came to the hospital. Brandon was with him. They stood in the hallway together with the awkward quiet of men who do not know how to arrange their faces for joy and grief at the same time. And I thought that whatever their family had been, and whatever it had done, these 2 men standing in this hallway were trying to find their way to something better. Maya let them come in. She let Raymond hold Clara for a few minutes, and I watched this man who would build half the county hold a 7-pound baby girl with his old careful hands, and I watched something in his face go very still and very soft. "She has your eyes," he told Maya. Maya looked at me instead of answering him. She smiled. We brought Clara home on a Thursday. Spring was fully open by then, azaleas running pink along every fence line, the air smelling like cut grass and tide. Derek carried the car seat up my porch steps and set it carefully on the floor of the living room, and we all stood around looking at the baby the way people do when they cannot quite believe a small person has appeared in a room. That night, after everyone had gone and Maya was resting and the house was quiet except for the occasional small sounds from the nursery, I sat on the back porch in my coat and looked at the marsh. I thought about Constance Holt and what her life would look like in 6 months, in a year, 5 years from now. The accounts emptied. The reputation she had built over decades gone, dismantled in federal filings that anyone with an internet connection could read. The foundation she had used as her instrument, now under new leadership appointed by the state attorney's office, its records opened, its programs rebuilt. I thought about whether I felt satisfaction, and I examined that question honestly, the way my father taught me to be honest with myself. What I felt was not satisfaction. It was closer to relief, the relief of having stood between my daughter and something that wanted to diminish her, and held. My grandmother Clara worked this land before she owned a single inch of it. She made herself necessary to people who preferred not to acknowledge her. She built quiet influence and patient knowledge, and she survived not by loudness but by depth, by knowing more than people expected her to know, by waiting longer than they expected her to wait. I did not fight Constance Holt with money. I do not have that. I fought her with what my family has always had. People who owed us. Knowledge that could not be buried. Patience that outlasted arrogance. And a daughter who took photographs on her phone before she ran. Maya came onto the porch wrapped in a blanket, carrying the baby against her chest. Clara was awake, dark eyes moving slowly over the unfamiliar shapes of the evening. "She's looking at the stars," Maya said. I put my arm around them both. She might be. Maya leaned her head against my shoulder. "I used to wonder sometimes if I should have just been different," she said quietly. "Less myself, more what that house needed. Would it have been easier?" I thought about my answer. "It would have been smaller," I said finally. "You would have been smaller. And she still would have wanted you gone." Maya nodded. She looked at her daughter's face. "I want Clara to know she doesn't have to make herself smaller for anyone. Not ever. She won't," I said. "Not with our blood in her." Maya smiled at that. "Our terrible, stubborn blood." "Our terrible, stubborn blood," I agreed. Clara made a small sound, not crying, something more like commentary. We both looked at her. "She has an opinion already," Maya said. "Of course she does." I stroked the baby's cheek with one finger. "She's a Ward woman. We always have opinions." The stars were coming out over the marsh. Somewhere out in the dark water, a heron called once and then was silent. The air was cool and clean and full of the smell of things growing. This is our county too, I thought. These roads and these waterways and the soil, it has always been ours too, however long anyone spent trying to tell us otherwise. My grandmother knew it. My father knew it. And this small person looking up at the evening sky will know it, because we will tell her every day that we have with her. Not because of where she came from, because of what it made her. If this story reached you tonight, I hope you'll hit the like button and subscribe to Quartz Revenge. We put out new stories every week because these voices deserve to be heard. The next one is already on your screen. We'll see you there, and we are so glad you stayed until the end.